Well, first of all, Michael, thank you so much for always being so gracious and giving so much of your time to interviews like this and also events. What do you think of Madeira?
It's a lovely island, beautiful views of the sea. I've never been here before, and it's amazing the society and the culture they built here in the middle of the Atlantic.
Well, you're traveling around the world now, giving the gospel of Bitcoin. So I want to hear, what is your feeling about the recent price action and the success of the ETF launch?
I expected the ETF launch to be successful, but I think it's quite impressive just how successful it's been. At this point, we can see that these ETFs are going to surpass gold ETFs in not too long a time. The Bitcoin ETFs are the most successful ETF launch in 30 years, and apparently in the first 30 days, they outperformed every other ETF. They've crawled to the top of 3,500 competitors in short order. And I think that they have sparked the bull run and the upward movement in the price. I mean, definitely there's a huge amount of institutional capital flowing into Bitcoin right now that is driving the price because of asset scarcity. I think the most important thing or the most important result of this is the ETFs themselves represent regulatory clarity for Bitcoin as the institutional grade crypto asset. I think that's a very important thing. I think secondarily, the ETFs represent an on-ramp for institutional money, and they open up a gateway between $100 trillion or more of institutional money and Bitcoin. I think the third thing is they have sparked this price action, and as Bitcoin moves back toward its all-time high, they have generated an extraordinary amount of media coverage and Wall Street awareness, and Bitcoin benefits from the awareness of the asset class, because as of now, 99% of the mainstream investors really have an incomplete understanding of Bitcoin, and the best thing that we could do is just build awareness that it is an asset class, and then people will start to do the work to understand what it is. And so all three of those things have been catalyzed over the past month by these ETF launches.
Well, ETFs have been a very popular investing vehicle over the last decade, and it seems like it's not just going to eat into the gold ETFs, but perhaps even maybe something like the S&P, the SPY ETF, which has been so popular. Do you have any thoughts on that?
That is one of the surprising consequences. We thought that maybe Bitcoin was a competitor to gold, but it's actually run up the leaderboard, and now it's starting to nip at the heels of the S&P 500 index ETFs. If you're looking for an analogy, imagine a business without a website. It was pools of money without an ETF ticker were mutual funds. So if we look at the history of investing, we kind of went from buy the stocks individually to trust a money manager with a mutual fund, and the mutual funds made Fidelity. And then 30 years later, the ETF came along, and it was a universal API that you could use to trade a mutual fund. So in the mutual fund world, it takes you a few days or a week or 2 weeks to set up an account, and it takes you a few days to move your money in the mutual fund. And you have to redeem your money, and it takes you a week to get your money out. And so it was a very slow, low frequency relationship. And the typical investor is going to just do business with one company like Fidelity. When the ETFs came along, you could have any stock trading app, and you could trade from one fund to another fund. You could trade, in and out of funds 6 times a day. You could every day say, well, I want to buy this thing from Fidelity, this thing from BlackRock, this thing from Vanguard. And you could put those funds in the same watch list as your Apple stock or your Google stock. So it's kind of the same impact the internet had, which is, oh, there's a retail store, there's a restaurant, what's the website? Like I want to say, let's go to a restaurant, you go check out the website, it says this is where it is, this is how long it is, these are pictures of it, this is the menu of it. Now, imagine I tell you we're going to meet at a hotel or in a restaurant and there is no website.
Yeah.
You're like, no. Like your reaction is, so how am I supposed to figure it out? Like, well, you get on a plane and you fly there and you walk through the door and you ask for the menu and at that point they tell you what it is. You think that just seems so 20th century. So, you're laughing, but like you can't do business without a website. The website is the universal API of information. That ETF ticker is the financial API for an investor. And so that has been extraordinarily successful, but Bitcoin, it's like Bitcoin didn't have a website, right? Bitcoin didn't have a website for institutional investors, and about a month ago, Bitcoin all of a sudden became something. You type it into, your Bloomberg, you type it into your Robinhood app, or you type it into any stock, E-Trade or any stock trading app, instant information, you can buy, you can sell. And of course, those ETF tickers, they don't just give people, perfect awareness and ability to transact. That's also the global protocol for trading volatility or for issuing credit. So if I had a bunch of money in Bitcoin and I wanted to get a loan against it, it might take me a month or 2 months to find someone that will give me a loan. Then I have to move to Bitcoin. Then I have to pay double the interest rate that's normal. And that's kind of scary. But after the ETF, people could have the same economic value in Bitcoin with JP Morgan or Merrill Lynch or Bank of America. And they could just say to this broker or banker they've been doing business with, like, I bought a house, I want a big mortgage on it, and I'm going to post a little bit of my Bitcoin as or securities as down payment against that mortgage, and I use it to get a mortgage, or I use it to get a margin loan, or maybe I could hedge against it. And so these ETFs opened up an entire financial world of awareness and opportunity and functionality to the 99% mainstream investors. And you really can't underestimate just how profoundly important that is to the entire network.
Coin Stories is brought to you by Bitdeer, where the power of Bitcoin mining is at your fingertips. As a publicly traded leader, Bitdeer's global reach and scale means they're everywhere you need them to be, ensuring you're part of the thriving Bitcoin economy. Bitdeer's not just mining, they are industry pioneers, and Bitdeer stands alone as the only vertically integrated, technology-focused Bitcoin mining company. What does that mean? Well, they're not just deploying, but developing the latest tech to make Bitcoin mining more efficient and effective. With the industry's most experienced leadership team, innovation is in their DNA, and it shows, with a quarter of their workforce dedicated to research and development, pushing the boundaries of what's possible in Bitcoin mining. Now they're leveraging years of expertise in data center and cloud management into high-performance computing through a recently announced partnership with NVIDIA. Join Bitdeer in reshaping the world of Bitcoin mining. Learn more at bitdeer.com and explore how they are pioneering the future today.
I had a guest on my show recently and a clip went viral because he said that the ETFs were a sign that the industry, the ecosystem sold out to Wall Street. That means that we're giving up, that Bitcoin, this decentralized network, is ultimately becoming centralized. And I wanted to get your reaction to that because I know that something you talked about in your speech here in Madeira was that we don't have enemies. We just have people we haven't recruited to be our supporters yet. And the government isn't our enemy. Wall Street's not our enemy. So maybe you can touch on some of those points.
Yeah, I think that ETFs are just another application of Bitcoin. And there are thousands and thousands of applications coming. So in this particular case, 1% of Bitcoin, 1% more assets kind of flowed into the ETFs. It boosted the price of Bitcoin in the last 2 months by $20,000 a coin. And that means that 99% of the $200 billion of market cap got created. And something like 99.7% of the benefit was for the people that didn't own the ETF. If you think about it,
Yeah.
and once you do the math, the ETF people bought in at 40,000 and drove the price to 60,000 and have 1%, and everybody else had the other 99% and their Bitcoin is worth 60,000. So in this particular case, if that's taking over Bitcoin by basically making all the people that don't use ETFs $200 billion richer, right? Then you probably want that to happen 100 more times. You'll see other apps. At some point, an insurance company will build Bitcoin into an insurance policy. And then companies will build Bitcoin into their balance sheet. And then a country, and if if a country that you don't like buys 1% of the Bitcoin supply and drives up the price by a factor of 2, it'll be another example of every other country getting 99% of the benefit. So as people embrace the Bitcoin network, and as they build applications on it, and as they invest in it, it's impossible for them to take it over, because the network outside of the new actor is actually getting more powerful at a faster rate, and it actually empowered the non-ETF holders 100x more than it empowered the ETF holders. So it's not a fear I have. I think that every single new participant just makes the entire network better and more successful, and empowers every other type of Bitcoiner.
So you've now been through your first full 4-year cycle, the highs, the lows. What's your biggest lesson that you took away from the bear market?
I think the lesson of Bitcoin is the best asset. There is no second best asset. Buy Bitcoin. Keep buying Bitcoin. Don't sell the Bitcoin. Ignore the noise.
Were there any moments, though, when it was plummeting down, a lot of people thought it would go below 10,000, that anything made you a little nervous? You wish you had waited to buy some of it?
No. The truth is, other people with either less information or less awareness, if someone studies Bitcoin for an hour, then they will watch the news for 1,000 days, and they will have 87 moments of anxiety during which they'll sell the Bitcoin. And so Bitcoin has a lot of those people. Like, they heard someone say buy it, and then they buy it. But if you would buy it because someone said it's a good idea, then you would sell it because someone said it was a bad idea, because you're not making your own decision. You're basically reacting to the crowd or sentiment or emotion. So a lot of people make investments based upon a recommendation from somebody else. And in the non-Bitcoin world, that's almost essential, because there's 10,000 stocks. Most people don't study. How many people spend 100 hours studying each of the S&P 500 stocks? Nobody. Okay, so if you own one of them, how many people spend 100 hours studying one stock that they own? 98% of people don't spend 100 hours studying the one stock. The stock analyst, the person that covers Apple, they spend 100 hours, and everybody else kind of outsources the thinking to that person and says the analyst put a buy rating on it, so I'll go ahead and take their recommendation, I'll buy the stock. And when the analyst puts a sell rating on it, they sell the stock. And that's understandable in the 20th century economy, because in a world where you have to sift through 100,000 different investment ideas to figure out what to buy and sell, you can't possibly do it. A dentist doesn't have the time to sift through 100,000 things. Okay, why do you have to sift through 100,000 different things in order to actually avoid losing all your money? And that's because the money's broken. Okay, so in a world where the money is broken, where there isn't a money where you can just buy the money and wait forever and have it go up, in that world, you're an investor and you're running your own hedge fund. And of course, most people don't have the time to run their own hedge fund, so they're the worst of all worlds. They're taking the risk of a hedge fund, but they're not putting the effort in to run a hedge fund. And even if they did, I mean, how many 65-year-old retirees, have the ability to do stock analysis on 500 different stocks? Like, I would argue almost none of them. So in this particular case, Bitcoin is a new asset class. It's digital money. Once you understand it's digital money, and you probably get there somewhere between 100 hours and 1,000 hours. Once you understand it's digital money, then you realize that the strategy is you just buy it and keep buying it and don't sell it until you have to pay a medical bill or until it's an urgent life or death matter where you just have to sell it. But otherwise, you just keep accumulating and you wait for all of the chaos and entropy and inefficiency and disorder that undermines every other asset to take hold. The longer the time goes on, the more difficult and the more disorder there is, and the more people appreciate the value of good money. So I wasn't bothered by the volatility. I was just waiting, for nature to right itself. Mm-hmm. And I think that the biggest mistake you can make is become insecure. Is it money? Is it not money? Right? Once you've made your decision, you're committed, then you're just thinking if the price is low, that means I get to buy more.
That's right. Well, I want to pull on the thread of what you said about money being broken. You've said money is toxic. I think a lot of people know something is wrong. Many people are turning to politics instead of maybe examining what's at the root of all of this, which is the economic issue of our financial system being broken. So why are more people not getting it, and how do we translate that message?
Western civilization used Roman numerals for a long, long time because of the Roman Empire. And if you've ever tried to use Roman numerals to subtract and add and divide and do math or program a computer, I don't know anybody that actually programs a computer with Roman numerals today. It's very, very challenging, but it was pretty sticky for a couple thousand years. And then at some point, Arabic numerals came along and someone said, we use these numbers like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and it's just a lot more efficient. And here's a new notation. Now, why does it take people so long? Well, because the old protocol is embedded in everything. It's embedded in the accounting. It's embedded in the law. It's embedded in... everybody spent 30 years of their life learning it. And so people struggle with new protocols. And so if I come up with a new protocol, which is an order of magnitude better or 2 orders of magnitude better, right? You have to migrate the institutions, the governments, the individuals, and oftentimes you have to have a generational shift. Bitcoin represents a new economic protocol, a new monetary protocol. So you have 5,000 years of recorded history during which humanity has functioned with defective money. And and every book on economics, by whether it was an Austrian economist or whether it was a fiat economist or any kind of economist or political economist or the like, every single book was written in a world where the money was mathematically defective. And it's impossible for you to appreciate the theoretical sound money or proper money until you've seen an example of one, right? You have to see one clean money. The Austrians, the only model they had was gold, but we knew that, but you couldn't make the argument in favor of perfected money using gold as an example, because gold actually suffered or created hyperinflation in Spain, in the 16th century. So someone could say, well, look, even in the gold standard, they had hyperinflation. So I guess gold's not perfect, so then my paper money is okay. So I think after 5,000 years of billions of people all writing about politics and economics based upon defective money, it's not surprising that it takes more than 15 years from the first theoretical establishment of proper money before people start to absorb the idea of clean, sound money, right? I mean, like there's not a single PhD economist that actually went to school in the era of perfected money, right? I use the phrase or the example of Dr. Harvey, and he discovered that the heart pumps blood out through the arteries back through the veins, and that it circulates through the body. He discovered that after thousands of years of belief that the blood did not circulate. And when he presented it to the world of medicine, he was castigated and rejected by every learned medical professional. And he famously said, nobody over the age of 40 will ever believe me. No doctor over the age of 40 will ever accept this. I'm just going to have to wait for them all to die. Planck said something similar, which he said, new scientific breakthroughs are never embraced by the establishment. You just have to wait for the next generation of scientists. You know, they just cannot accept the profound paradigm shift. In this particular case, you know, you can take the position that people are just stubborn, but you can also, if you want to see it from their point of view, you can say, look, we all grew up speaking the English language, and then you introduced a new language which is 27 times more efficient. Mm-hmm. But you know, I'm just too old to learn that language, right? It's a new thing. The world is changing too fast. So it's like, I came from the old world. I spoke French or Italian or Spanish. I struggle with English, but my kids speak perfect English. And of course, because they speak perfect English, they're professors and CEOs and politicians and presidents. And I will not be a president or a CEO because my English is not quite good enough to compete in that economy. Was I a bad person? No, I was just in a generational shift. And now we've got to move on to the next thing. And it's not easy to turn your entire worldview upside down, inside out, even if it gives you a 10 or 100x advantage over the traditional view.
No, that's very true. And a lot of people are having a hard time seeing what is right in front of them with Bitcoin, and they resist and reject in so many ways. You're such a student of history, and I wanted to ask you, what do you think is the ideal form of government and its role with money? Because a lot of people right now, both in Bitcoin and outside, I feel like there's a growing distrust in government. People want government out of their lives. They feel like government has screwed things up, including the money. So what is the ideal government and its role with money?
I think Bitcoin provides an inspired example, as does nature. You know, for example, your DNA in nature transmits all that's necessary for the future of the species. And so from a small strand of DNA, millions and millions of creatures can form, you know, and those, you know, whether it's birds, they kind of come out knowing how to fly, or a spider knows how to spin a web, or, you know, a fish knows how to swim. You know, you look at them and you're like, well, how did they figure that out? And it starts with a strand of DNA. And you basically inject the most elegant protocol, elegant piece of code into nature, subject to the laws of physics and the laws of nature, and then life manifests. And it's beautiful, right? Whether it's a tree or a bird or your dog, right? With regard to Bitcoin, you have the most elegant piece of code, a very elegant protocol, right? With not that many lines of code. It's like a virus or like a strand of DNA. It's a genetic code for a system, a trust network, a money network, an energy network. It gets released and it spreads to 10 people, 100 people, 1,000 people, 1 million people, 10 million people, 100 million people, and it metastasizes, and it moves through corporations and governments and nonprofits and the like. And how is it distinguished from every other crypto? It's not more complicated, it's simpler. Right? Everybody else looks and says, I have to make it more complicated, and they break it. Right? So why is Bitcoin great? Because it is elegantly profound and decentralized. You know, why is life great? It's like there's no one tinkering with the genetic code of the mice and trying to actually capture 18 billion mice and inject them with a new upgrade, right? There's no one that's actually, when you start trying to like sequester 1 billion people and inject them with your idea, right? It doesn't make things better, right? So centralized planning and centralized tinkering actually undermines the ecosystem. It doesn't help it. So nature is decentralized and elegant, and Bitcoin is decentralized and elegant. And so now we get to the question of government. What's the best government? The least government, decentralized and elegant. Some simple, elegant rules, right? That are decentralized and pushed down to the most local element. A country that has 50 states that all act independently is much more robust, anti-fragile, perhaps just, offers more dignity and more freedom to its citizens than a country with no states and just a single central government. A country that has separated branches of government, has checks and balances with a strong judiciary, a strong executive branch, but also a strong legislative branch, and perhaps even upper and lower houses of the legislative branch, and a system of checks and balances offers more freedom and is more functional. The more centralized the government and the more power that can be acted upon by fiat by an individual or by a small group, right? The more fragile the government is, and so ultimately, it's the key to what the reason the universe works is no well-meaning genius graduates from college with a PhD and decides to change the speed of light or the speed of sound or the gravitational constant, right? God doesn't change the speed of light and the gravitational constant. If that was changed, every mechanism on Earth would stop working and every building would collapse and everybody would die, right? That's why the universe works. The reason that life works is that no alpha male genius rat gets to change the genetic code of all the other rats, right? It's like, and when you have a new idea, like, oh, I think that I'm going to live by myself on an island spearfishing. If that works and you're able to procreate and prosper, maybe there'll be millions of people like you on that island. But if it turns out you forgot to bring someone to procreate with, or if it turns out you run out of stuff to spearfish with, or you can't catch the fish, you're going to die. And that entire idea gets pruned out of the genetic tree of life. And I think the same is true with Bitcoin. Someone that comes up with a better idea for Bitcoin and we just ignore them. You fork off a Bitcoin and you know what happened with the Bitcoin forks, and they all go to zero. And that's basically natural selection, the laws of nature, and the market economy working. With government, when the governments have some natural selection, like some state comes up with a rule, you're not allowed to wear orange, and you can't work on Tuesday and Thursday. Everybody gets to leave that state, move to the other state where you can wear orange and work on Tuesday and Thursday. And then people in the first state kind of realize that maybe that wasn't very rational. And so maybe there's a hope for you. But when the person at the top of the government gets to dictate no working on Tuesday and Thursday and no orange, pretty soon it becomes nobody with blue eyes can vote. And then pretty soon it's nobody with blue eyes is allowed to be free. And you just plunge into a dark abyss at that point. It's too much power and too little natural law and market economics.
It's time for a quick break to hear these messages from my partners who make this podcast possible. First up, Bitcoin 2024, the world's largest Bitcoin conference, is coming to Nashville this July. Join us for 3 amazing days of keynotes, panels, networking events, workshops, concerts, and my 3rd annual Women of Bitcoin brunch. The Bitcoin conference is actually where I launched my podcast almost 3 years ago. You never know what can happen or who you can meet here. Head to b.tc/conference and use the code HODL, HODL, for 10% off. Next up, CrowdHealth. Health insurance costs are sky high, and it's money that feels wasted if you don't need a doctor. That's why CrowdHealth offers a community-based alternative by crowdfunding healthcare with other Bitcoiners. I get to avoid traditional insurance fees and support real people, not mega corporations. Visit joincrowdhealth.com/Natalie and join us. And finally, the why of Bitcoin is easy to grasp, but the how can be so confusing. The Bitcoin Way is your professional Bitcoin IT and security team that offers personalized one-on-one support to guide you through cold storage, setting up a node, inheritance planning, privacy best practices, and more. Don't take my word for it. Take 82-year-old customer Bill's.
Give the Bitcoin Way a try. You will be well on your way to owning and protecting the greatest money ever discovered.
Set up your free 30-minute consultation with the Bitcoin Way today. All right, back to the show.
If systems function better in a decentralized way, more organically, why over history do we have a tendency to concentrate power and centralize? Is it that technology leads us that way? Is it part human nature? Is it because our money has been broken?
I think, history is like 50,000 stories of some well-meaning, inspired person thinking that they can do better. They want to fix things. So there's a continual power dynamic and a gathering of power, whether it's at the family level, the clan level, the tribe level, the city level, the provincial level, the state level, the country level. And you tend to see power aggregate. And I think it's because there's a natural process. If you have one state next to another state, and the one state has a leader that wants to aggregate and channel power. So what do I do first? I want as many people as possible, and then I want to feed them bread and water because that's cheaper, and then I get an army 10,000 times bigger. And it's maybe not so healthy to do that, but I don't care if they live to 60 or 80. I just want them to live to 25 to be in my army. So then once I gather the army, then I basically decide that the people across the river speak the wrong language, worship the wrong God, or they looked at me the wrong way. So the people across the river are decentralized, peaceful in 27 different hamlets, and they eat good food, and they're organic farmers, and there aren't as many of them, and they don't spend all their time killing each other. So, so the great, on the left side of the river gathers, 27,000 teenagers, gives them spears, charges across the river, and murders all the peaceful people, takes all their stuff. And now the great rules over both parts of the island, and then they do it again, and they grow, and at some point they get to some extreme, and then their people start dying, and then their communication lines get elongated, and they start to collapse under their own weight. There's an entropic frontier. For example, it's better for you to get bigger, but when you get bigger than an elephant, you collapse under your own weight, and there really aren't creatures bigger than elephants because the law of physics starts to work against that. So in this particular case, the law of nature is there's an advantage to the violent over the non-violent, which is unfortunate, and we've always had this cycle of violence, and you just have the rise and then subsequent fall of empires as another empire rises and fall. And generally the violent dynamic is driven by the fact that the property is all material, and so there's an incentive to violence because if I simply cross the river and kill everybody on the other side, I get all their land. Mm-hmm. Right? And so that will continue, until the entire society gets to its extreme. Like Alexander the Great kills and kills and kills, and he gets to this point where he's gone all the way into India, and then he dies, and the entire thing breaks up and collapses, and then all the little ones continue. It's not a beautiful story by any means. It's really a tragedy, 10,000 times over. Right. And throughout the humanity attempts to crawl out of that cycle of violence. And the way we crawl out of the cycle of violence is with some combination of inspired philosophy and inspired systems. If you can establish an economic system of interdependency, then you channel your energy into trade. Mm-hmm. Like if the way I get rich 1,000 years ago is I kill somebody else, then right, all of the alpha males in the society were taught to fight and lead armies, and that's the only way you created property. And if the way you get rich is writing computer code, then maybe all of the upwardly mobile individuals decide to channel their energy into writing computer code to destroy the other software company. So I think that that the formation of global markets and the availability of peaceful pursuits to channel basic human aggression, are useful and constructive, but it is always a tenuous balance between the tendency toward violence and the tendency toward cooperation or creation of sorts.
How will Bitcoin's impact on the world meet with those forces? Because one thing that I've actually heard is that people fear that Bitcoin will be hoarded, and then it will be amassed by a few people or few organizations at the tippy top, and it will be this even more dramatic concentration of wealth than we see today. But others are saying, no, it will be a more egalitarian society because the distribution will diffuse more and more over time as people provide value in order to earn their Bitcoin. So how do you see it?
I think it's continuing to decentralize. I think that every single time you have a new participant in the network, they decentralize the network further. And I think that the more participants we have, the less likely it is that someone will corrupt the network. I think that if you have powerful companies and powerful owners in 100 different countries, the network is less likely to be corrupted. Its integrity is enhanced because now you have strong political actors with a vested interest to keep anybody from attacking the network. So I don't really think if fill in the blank, if a country in the Middle East decided that they wanted to buy a lot of Bitcoin, I don't think they're taking over Bitcoin because 99% of the Bitcoin is in someone else's hands and they triple the price of Bitcoin. And so the 99% of the people that hold the rest of Bitcoin just got 3 times as powerful. And so there's no way for someone to join the network and undermine the network. They're strengthening the network as they join it. What they would do is if a big player in the Middle East joined the network and became embedded and had skin in the game, if the US government took an adverse position, you would have another sovereign that would take the opposite position. Mm-hmm. So if you're worried about one country or one company having an influence, then the best thing that could possibly happen is have 10 other companies in 10 other countries, because now you have a network of interdependencies and you have checks and balances throughout. And I think that we've got more and more checks and balances. And as people invest more in the network, they become more conservative and they will resist, enthusiastic proposals to fix Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. Right? It's like, it's very easy. I notice that most enthusiastic proposals to fix Bitcoin come from people that don't have any Bitcoin, right? And if you actually bet your entire country on Bitcoin, then you wouldn't be so enthusiastic to tinker with the network. If you bet your entire company on Bitcoin, then you wouldn't want to tinker. So ironically, these bigger actors are actually more conservative. They like it because they can trust it, and they can trust it because no one's changing it. If you take certain other crypto networks where they change them every 6 months, mm-hmm. and they tinker with them, every time you do a hard fork, you could destroy the entire thing.
Right.
So who is in favor of hard forks? it's generally the protocol developers that want a job. They want to do something to help. They're the only ones that can do the hard forks. So they're the ones who promote them. Who doesn't want to do the hard forks? It's everyone that's bet their life, their future. If you're actually planning, if you're buying a lot of Bitcoin to give to your great-great-granddaughter, you're not terribly enthusiastic about a roadmap with 6 hard forks, right? So I think that there's no way for any one actor to get control of the network. All you can do is empower the rest of the network by a factor of 100. And owning a lot of Bitcoin doesn't really give you power. I mean, the network,
Right.
The network is stabilized by a combination of computer power, electric power, political power, economic power, right? And transactional power. So, Coinbase and Cash App have power, but that's different than the BlackRock power. And that's different than the Marathon or the Riot or all the Bitcoin mining power. And that's different than the power of all the node runners. And that's different than the power of the regulators or the politicians that support it. And so there's a lot of different power in the network, and it's just getting more decentralized. Now it just turns out that instead of the traditional Bitcoin voices from 2020, you still got them, but you've also got voices from Fidelity and BlackRock and other players, and you've got voices from the senators and the Congress people that support them, and you've got voices of the regulator that approved the ETF. That's not fewer voices, that's more voices. And the only reason that Bitcoin was approved as an ETF is the consensus that it's a commodity. And the fundamental distinction of a commodity is it's an asset without an issuer. Mm-hmm. And that means that it has to be the consensus of everybody in the world. There isn't one single voice that can change the protocol, speak for the protocol, or is even relevant, right? If there isn't anybody, none of these buyers could speak for it. And of course, the thing you have to keep in mind, right, is sometimes people are kind of cynical in the Bitcoin community, and they always assume the worst. But if someone's going to actually buy $1 billion of Bitcoin that didn't buy it before, they're not buying it because they think you can change it.
Right.
They're not buying it because they think they can change it. If I thought I could change Bitcoin, I wouldn't have bought any Bitcoin, right? For ethical reasons, it would be a security. For legal reasons, and then just for technical reasons. If it's weak enough for me to change, why would I trust the money of all my shareholders on the network? So now you've got this interesting logical conundrum. The person that bought the $1 billion of Bitcoin is too stupid to understand why they bought it, and that's why they gave you their money. After 15 years of not wanting to buy it, they all of a sudden, they bought it not knowing why for stupid reasons. Or the person that bought it, looked at it, studied it, and came to a rational conclusion that they would actually invest $1 billion because they thought that they couldn't change it and no one else could change it. Right? And it seems pretty obvious that if you find 100 people that are intelligent enough to make $1 billion risk or $1 billion bet, they're the smart money. The smart money is buying Bitcoin because it is the crypto commodity network. It is the decentralized asset without an issuer, right? The dumb money is buying everything else.
That's right. That's right.
So I don't worry about the people joining our network. We're winning the smart ones, and they're going to fight to defend the values of Bitcoin. You want to worry about it, right? Your enemies aren't the people buying Bitcoin because they want a decentralized crypto asset that's without an issuer. Your enemies are the people that are buying an inferior asset like gold or real estate or equity or bonds, or they're buying a crypto token network, which is centrally controlled, that is an asset with an issuer. Those are the people that actually have the vested interest in undermining Bitcoin because they're threatened by a superior technical, ethical, economic idea.
Let's talk a little bit about Bitcoin being a trust network and the work you're doing turning MicroStrategy into this Bitcoin development company, because Bitcoin facilitates the ability for businesses to securely transact with one another. And businesses securely transacting is really the cybersecurity of any nation, and we need to advance to cryptographic security. So can you talk a little bit about that and the role that maybe MicroStrategy will play?
Yeah, today there's a security vacuum in the world, and that security vacuum derives from the fact that it's very difficult to establish your identity in cyberspace in an open, permissionless, trustless fashion. So right now, they use the login with Apple, and they trust Apple with all their passwords and their identity. And if you lose your iPhone or get kicked off the Apple network, that's a big problem. In a world of proprietary online identity or proprietary digital identity, you have these authentication credentials in a very fragile corporate database. And maybe you trust Apple or Google or Microsoft. Now the next question is, does the US government trust them with its credentials? Okay, now the next question is, does the Chinese government trust them? Does the Russian or the Ukrainian or the EU or any South American or African government? And now you get to this interesting issue, which is, how do I establish my digital passport or my cyber identity in an open global fashion that would be accepted by every country on earth, that would be accepted by every company on earth, and that would be accepted 100 years from now? When I actually create a document, how do I sign a document and certify it such that 500 years from now it will not be tampered with? And this challenge of how do I inscribe a piece of information on an immutable network that's unstoppable and immortal, right? This was the challenge that Satoshi struggled with in the white paper, and this is what Satoshi solved with Bitcoin. And the killer app that we've used it for is for $1 trillion worth of money or property on a crypto network. But you have 8 billion people on the planet, and 8 billion people need an identity. And right now, if you go to X, you can pay $8 a month or $96 a year for a blue check, or you can pay double that for a premium blue check. And if you want to be a corporation with an identity, you can pay $1,000 a month for a gold check, and then $50 for each additional person for a gold check. And if you've done that, that gives you the ability to post things on one platform. But that doesn't solve your problem of how you send a message on all the other 100 platforms. How do you post something on TikTok or Instagram or WhatsApp or Signal or iMessage and stuff? You have these proprietary silos. You have the iMessage check, you have the Instagram check, you have the YouTube check, you have the X check, and then you have the Microsoft sort of check. They're all hyper expensive, hyper cumbersome. And what we need is a single open system that is not subject to nation state capture, that where your identity can't be scrubbed out with a subpoena. Maybe you trust your government, but do you trust the government that your government's at war with? Because they could scrub you out with their subpoena on their server. So the promise of Bitcoin really is, if you take a public-private key combination and you can sign a transaction, you can also send a message. And if your transaction happens, if you use those keys and you start to digitally sign messages or you sign documents, then you can create a crypto seal that is unstoppable, timeless, immutable, and open to authentication by anybody in the world. that is profound significance, because what that means is I could digitally sign all my messages across all my platforms with that open protocol. I could also sign a document and timestamp the document for all time. So it's like not just that I signed it, but you could see when I signed it, and no company and no government could tamper with that timestamp. And of course, you could take it beyond that. You could say, I could hash the document. So if I write a will that bequeaths billions of dollars, I could create the will, hash the document, give a copy of the will to my lawyer, but then I could give that transactional information and the private key to my descendants or my heirs. And when the will comes out of the safe or out of the vault, they could actually check the hash and make sure that the lawyer hadn't actually tampered with the will. And maybe the government could know that no one had tampered with the will, or whatever it might be. And so you can take these in a number of directions, but the real big idea is, if Bitcoin is secure enough to send $1 billion from point A to point B, then maybe there are corporations that have $1 billion documents, or maybe there are contracts that are worth $1 billion, or maybe there are government documents and government edicts that are worth $1 billion that you would actually want to immutably document, sign, certify, and or inscribe on Bitcoin. And when you look at it like that, I think the way to think of it is, there are three different obvious use cases of Bitcoin. One is a store of value, and that store of value use case is well understood. We're at $1 trillion in that store of value, and there's no reason why it won't go to 100 trillion plus. The second use case is medium of exchange, and that's using Bitcoin in high frequency transactions. It's Cash App, it's Lightning wallets, it's etc. It requires a lot of coding, a lot more layer 2, layer 3 functionality, a lot of compliance work. It's more challenging, and people are doing that work today. The third use case is system of trust. Can I anchor my corporate correspondence? Can I anchor my corporate security, my national security, my social security, my personal security into that network, such that I can prove who I am, and I can prove, when I call you on the phone and say, help, I've been kidnapped, or whatever, you can trust this. Is it me, or is it an AI bot?
Right.
And right now, you really can't tell. We're very close to the inflection point. Maybe we've reached it where you can't tell the difference between the person and the AI generated content. And so clearly the next step is you need to sign things with your private keys. And I think the entire Bitcoin ecosystem has developed really the most advanced methodology for key management, multi-key management, for signing devices, for 12 and 24 phrase recovery seed phrase, etc. There's an entire body of knowledge that's developed in order to protect money and move money. But there's probably nothing more important than yourself, And so I think the phrase in Bitcoin is not your keys, not your coin. But I think that the phrase eventually will become not your keys, not yourself.
Yeah, true.
And it's not yourself for 8 billion people. It's not yourself for 300 million corporations. It's not yourself for every government agency, for every institution, for every credible entity. And so that there is a vacuum of credibility in cyberspace now that's creating chaos and will lead to disaster if not corrected. And Bitcoin is the cure.
What is the best way to build profitable businesses in the Bitcoin ecosystem? Because it seems like it's been a challenge within, trying to find economic models for things like Nostr and these other decentralized platforms that use Bitcoin and want to spread it in different mediums. What's the best way?
Well, I think the first advice is focus, laser-like focus on one particular use case, one offering, have a very clear idea of who's your target customer and what is the value proposition you're trying to give them. Then I think, if we look across these, right, the issue is it related to store of value? Is it related to medium of exchange? Is it related to system of trust? And maybe there's some other use case I haven't named here. I mean, I don't preclude other use cases, but let's take advantage of successful businesses. I think if you look at Cash App has been successful in the medium of exchange business. They've been laser-like focused. They're not all things to all people. They don't do business everywhere in the world, right? And they don't support every asset. You can't buy every other crypto dog coin on Cash App. So they're very focused, and they spend a lot of time to do things right technically. And then in that case, if there's compliance issues, you have to focus on the compliance, right? And so they're focused on the compliance, focused upon the value proposition, focused upon the user experience, and they have been rewarded with success. They sell $2 billion of Bitcoin every quarter, billions, $10 billion of Bitcoin a year or something. And they're a public company, and they got a very successful stock, and they're well thought of. Take another example. BlackRock came out of the gate. What's their application? IBIT as a Bitcoin store of value. Okay, why are they successful? Well, they already had a customer base. They already had a distribution channel. They've already got a platform. They've already got a brand. They focused on Bitcoin. They didn't make it too complicated. It's like, we will buy the Bitcoin and store the Bitcoin for you and charge you 25 basis points for the Bitcoin. Okay, and the result is they've raised $10 billion in capital in a month. Okay, and who's their customer? Institutional or retail investors that want to use an ETF wrapper to buy Bitcoin. Are they doing other things? No, they're doing that thing. Okay, or how many other things can you do with Bitcoin? Oh, 100,000. Now, are they going to do the other 100,000? No. What are they going to do? Well, they're going to take the $10 billion to $20 billion to $40 billion to $80 billion to $160 billion to $250 billion to $1 trillion if they can. And can they? Yeah. Okay, so focus, right? Focus on that thing. You go to the next thing, whatever it is. If it's a system of trust application, in our case at MicroStrategy, well, we're focusing upon an orange check, but the idea is an orange check for Outlook in the Microsoft ecosystem. Every company in the world uses Microsoft. There's millions and millions of big customers of Microsoft. What's the problem? I send a message in Outlook from me to you, and there's not an easy way to digitally sign it. Solution? I send you an email, you click on a blue button, you get your private key. Now there's an extension in Outlook, and when you type a message, the extension uses your private key to encrypt the message. It goes to someone else. They have an extension, they decrypt it, authenticate it. There's your orange check. Okay, is it solving all the other problems on YouTube and Twitter and Facebook and no, it's not. Are there 100,000 other platforms to authenticate across? Yes, but it's a very long tail of things. What are we going to do? We're not going to solve the problem of how you get an orange check on X or an orange check on Instagram. We're going to solve the problem of how you get an orange check on Microsoft. Why? Because we're an enterprise software company. Our customers are enterprises. We can make that work, right? And so I think, having said all that, right, if you've got that very close focus, that's my market, that's my solution, that's what integrates with Bitcoin. If you've got that tight focus, then there's still no guarantee. But one thing's for sure, if you meander and you try to do all things for all people, or you try to do too many different things, then the problem becomes exponentially more complicated and exponentially more risky. And so you probably just don't get the ball across the finish line.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't focus, but I love that that's one of your life lessons too. Okay, to wrap up, I'm going to do a little bit of a lightning round. Why should Jamie Dimon love Bitcoin?
Because Bitcoin is the future, and JP Morgan is the greatest bank in the United States. And if it wants to remain the greatest bank in the United States or in the world, then it needs to support the future of assets.
Why should Elizabeth Warren love Bitcoin?
Because it empowers all of the disenfranchised in the world that she speaks for.
Why should a single mother on food stamps love Bitcoin?
Because it gives her hope to save for the future, and it's the best possible savings technology for her and her family.
Why should a boomer about to retire love Bitcoin?
Because everything else they could invest in or depend upon is riskier.
And lastly, why should a teenager in a third world country love Bitcoin?
Because it gives them a conduit to the first world and the global economy, and lets them participate in that economy.
Who has made the biggest impact on your life?
Satoshi.
Really? Okay, I love that. If you could transport yourself to any time in history, what would it be and why?
Now,
You want to be
forward,
now.
we're going to look at history as before Satoshi and after Satoshi. And the ability to bring Bitcoin to the 99% of the world that has not yet embraced it in the year 2024. Like, this is the Bitcoin gold rush. The next 10 years is the most exciting opportunity to improve the world that has ever existed.
What's better, having money or having power?
Money is power.
How often do you check Bitcoin's price?
Every few hours.
And who do you think is the smartest person in the world?
I don't think there is any one smartest person in the world. I think that knowledge is a vector. And I think that, in the time period when Beethoven was perhaps the greatest musician, you could have characterized Newton as the greatest physicist, but you could have pointed out to people like Leibniz as great thinkers. At any given time, there's 10,000 capabilities the human race needs, and there's 10,000 at the apex of their field.
Well, you're at the apex. You're an incredible thinker. Your knowledge is beyond measure. I mean, so many people, I would say, including me, I think you're the smartest person on this planet. We're lucky to have you in Bitcoin. Just to kind of touch a little bit finally on intelligence, because I know you've dedicated so much of your work to the spreading intelligence around the world. Do you think that intelligence is something that can be learned by anyone? Like, anyone could be intelligent, or are you born with a certain capacity to learn and grow in knowledge? Because I know you're passionate about education, making sure that education is accessible to everyone. Now everyone has more information at the palm of their hand than, kings and rulers had for many years. But can anyone be like you?
I think that we all have a genetic predisposition toward certain capabilities and certain behaviors, and you can see it, in the dolphin born, and 5 seconds later it's swimming better than you. Yeah. And it's pretty obvious that dolphins are genetically predisposed to swim, and spiders are predisposed to spin webs. I think if you've ever seen a 3-year-old girl dance better than her 35-year-old aunt, it's pretty clear she was born being good. Just like you see musical prodigies, you see everybody's got a certain set of capabilities and predispositions, and you can't control that. But what you do get to control is where you apply yourself. That, if you have a predisposition but you don't do the 10,000 hours of work, you won't rise to the top of your profession. So my advice to anybody is figure out what your predisposition and capabilities are, then choose, where you're going to apply yourself, right? If it's the piano and you're Beethoven, then something great will come out of it. But you had to have the piano. And if Beethoven had been born 1,000 years earlier, he wouldn't have written those piano concertos. You wouldn't be remembering him the same way. So I think everybody has the choice, and you have to decide, what do you want to focus on? And there's a world of opportunity today. It's all at your fingertips. If you go on YouTube, you want to master AI art generation or AI video generation or programming, Or do you want to learn how to build, Lightning applications? Or do you want to master Bitcoin as money? Or do you want to study cybersecurity, right? And there's no doubt some people have a natural talent and they develop. Magnus Carlsen was a better chess player, at age 11 than I would be if I spent my entire life 3,000 hours a year playing chess. And it's pretty obvious to me I'm just never going to be that good. But I don't dwell on the fact that there's a better musician or a better chess player than me. I just focus upon what is my highest, best, purpose in life. How do I achieve my full potential? And my advice to anybody is figure out what you love, figure out, what the world needs, hopefully find an intersection between what the world needs and what you love, because you get paid for that. Mm-hmm. And then focus on that, and don't spend a lot of time lamenting the fact that you don't play golf or basketball or chess or music as good as somebody else. Yeah. There's always a bigger, better deal somewhere, and the internet proves that. You ought to your real worry ought to be that you get distracted by 100 different things that are all exciting and interesting, good ideas, because the world is really good at serving you up 10 other things to do in addition to the thing you're currently doing. So I would figure out what you can do, what the world needs you to do, laser-like into that thing. Don't get distracted on that thing. You will achieve your full potential, whatever that would be, and it'll probably be 10x what you would have achieved, or 100x or 1,000x what you would have achieved if you just kind of took a cavalier attitude toward everything.
I love that. It's super inspiring. And I love that you brought up chess, because I see Bitcoin as providing the opportunity for people to become chess players in their life and stop being the chess pieces. So last question, do you think you were meant or born for greatness?
No, I think that all of us simply play the cards we're dealt. Right? So, you're born with a certain genetic predisposition, and I guess I'm exactly where I ought to be right now. And I'm grateful that I discovered Bitcoin. Because before Bitcoin, I was just ready to retire into obscurity, and I thought that I had written the final chapter in my life. And make no mistake about it, right? The great person of our era will be remembered as Satoshi, right? We will date human civilization to before and after Satoshi, right? That was the paradigm shift. All the rest of us, are able to do whatever we're doing. Me, you, every other great leader in the Bitcoin ecosystem, because Satoshi extracted this beautiful, wonderful idea out of the ether and started a fire in cyberspace. Right? I'm not Prometheus. I'm just the guy that stumbled across the fire and thought, well, maybe we can do stuff with fire. The fire was given to us.
I love it. You are my favorite person to listen to and also talk with. Just thank you so much. And you are doing amazing things. And I think your Bitcoin book has just started. So I can't wait to keep reading it.
You're too kind. Thank you.
Thank you so much for checking out this episode of Coin Stories. If you want to connect more, make sure to check out this podcast on the Fountain app. It brings creators like me closer to the global community of listeners, and it's all powered by Bitcoin. You can share the best moments of this podcast and stream stats directly to your favorite podcast hosts. And you get paid when other listeners like your clips, comments, or playlists, or just for being a regular listener. Get rewarded for helping build this incredible community. Download the Fountain app today and subscribe to Coin Stories. This show is for entertainment and educational purposes only. Nothing should constitute as official investment advice, and you should always do your own research. My inbox is open if you want to share feedback or guest suggestions. Just reach out at Natalie@talkingbitcoin.com. I'll see you next time.